Hey guys, it's Carrie Eink
and Sarah Norris from the Star Institute.
Yeah, so today we're talking about a newer topic that I don't think we've talked about much in prior videos. But today we're going to talk about different types of strategies that you might use to cope with SPD, specifically talking about adolescence and adulthood, and about what are some of the common coping strategies that we see when individuals come to us. What we're finding are some of the most effective strategies when we're working with teens and adults, and kind of going through those.
So kind of to get us started thinking about how we manage SPD in younger kids, a lot of times there's a lot of signs that show us that there's challenges going on. So there might be acting out, there might be anxiety, there might be things that show that this is a child that's struggling.
Yeah, so what would we do as OTs in childhood with a child who has SPD? We would get their body moving through play, through different things in the gym. I think kind of universally, that's kind of the OT treatment method for kids when working with them that we know best treats SPD and best helps get those neural pathways all firing more appropriately.
And so what that essentially does for those kids is help them connect with their bodies. And when they get connected with their bodies, they are calmer, they're more regulated, they can handle conflict better, they can interact with others better, and a lot of things just become a lot smoother in their lives. So they can transition, they can problem solve, they can play. And so it's really transformative when a child actually gets connected with their body and feels good.
Yeah, we call that the bottom-up approach. And we usually talk to parents about that in our first feedback meeting. So we talk about, we're not necessarily going to go through each task with your child and teach them how to do all these things with different tricks and techniques. What we find is that if we just strengthen each of those sensory systems from a foundational level, a lot of those things end up falling into place.
And it doesn't mean there isn't a place for teaching kids scripts and teaching kids expectations and walking them through that. But if they're not regulated, they're not going to be able to access, I should be doing this when I'm feeling like throwing a tantrum.
Yeah, so we kind of fast forward into the teenage years, and a lot of changes happen from childhood to teenage years. And what we know is that SPD is a lifelong condition. And so if you have SPD as a kid, you're likely going to have it as a teenager. So when individuals become teens, a lot of things happen. Hormones change, their expectations change, their level of independence changes. And I know we've talked about that in some of the prior videos, but what also changes is their ability to have ideas about what they want to do throughout the day. And so what we tend to see is the occupations, the play activities tend to change as well. And a lot of times when you get to those adolescent years, if there's still some difficulties processing sensory information, especially from those movement senses, the touch senses, likely these teenagers aren't going to want to participate in movement-based activities. Maybe they'll participate in the ones that they feel comfortable in, that they feel successful in, but unfortunately that's where we spend a lot of our time with teenagers, is finding what activities do feel good. A lot of times they come in, some of their activities that they enjoy are more sedentary, video games, drawing, watching TV, some of those things, just because movement doesn't feel as good anymore.
And so thinking about what happens to those kids that maybe didn't get intervention or didn't get enough intervention when they were kids, didn't ever really connect with their bodies. And as they get older, they learn, oh, it's not accepted for, not only for me to act out when I'm having a hard time, but it's also not accepted for me to fail. And when I'm unsuccessful with different activities, I learn that it doesn't feel good and people don't give me good feedback about them, so I don't want to do them anymore. And even though those might be the activities that are the most supportive for them, there's too much of that shame and guilt and just not feeling good about themselves to continue to get the kind of input their bodies need.
Yeah, and so what we know about the nervous system is that it's always trying to reach this homeostasis point, that just right point. And so what our brain does, as any individual trying to overcome something, is we access whatever brain region we can to try to manage and feel okay just for that moment or the next moment. So what we're finding with teenagers and then into adulthood is that this need to feel safe, to feel calm, the best place that they can find to go is usually through their thinking processes and through, some of those frontal areas of the brain that control thinking, problem solving, reasoning, some of those academic or more cognitive areas.
So some people do it intentionally and they know that they're doing it. Some people do it without realizing that it's a compensation that they're doing. So, for example, you might have a teenager that says, yeah, I'm not athletic. I know I'm not good at it, and I much prefer reading and writing, and so I choose to spend my time doing that. That's someone who's recognized that this is what I'm doing. But you might have individuals that don't necessarily know that they're escaping or they're doing something differently. And that can be anger at others. Oh yeah, people are mean to me. I'd much rather go home and play video games because that's one place where I feel really good and I feel successful. And so there are different ways that you can compensate, and some of them are healthy and positive, and some of them may not be as healthy or as positive. And even just identifying the reason why you developed those strategies can be really helpful. I know with a lot of the adults that I work with, there's this tendency to be really, really forward thinking, to prepare for things that might be uncomfortable or for things that might not go well. So really planning ahead every detail, making sure you're ultra prepared for every potential thing that might come up that would be a problem. And it's really to avoid the stress and the burden of problem solving in the moment that can be really uncomfortable for some adults who really struggle with staying regulated under stress.
Yeah, and another area that I'm still learning about as an OT, especially working at STAR, is thinking about a lot of the individuals that we see that are gifted, highly gifted, or twice exceptional. There's a lot of different terms that we can use to describe those types of individuals, but those are some of the individuals we see throughout the lifespan. So as young as kindergarten, first grade, up to, older adulthood. Maybe some of them have been identified as gifted, some of them have been identified as twice exceptional, or maybe they've just always kind of known it. Maybe their parents always just kind of knew it. And really thinking about what that means in terms of development. And so what we talk about a lot at STAR is uneven development. So if you have your cognition and intelligence that is really high, but we know your sensory processing areas, your emotional areas are maybe a little bit below average, there's this big gap that happens with your cognition, your intelligence, and then your emotions, your processing, and all of those more foundational levels. And there's becomes this huge area of confusion that, and especially as you continue getting older into the lifespan, it's that feeling of, I know I shouldn't be feeling this way, and I don't know why I'm feeling this way, so I'm going to, just find a way to block it out entirely. And so I'm just going to block out my senses and just get through until I have a meltdown, or until I can just get through what I have to and need to. Or I'm going to be really angry, or I'm going to be really nervous about what others are going to think of me because of that. I find that in high school and college years, that's such a hard thing for some of these individuals to grasp with. Sitting in the classroom and not understanding why they can't listen to the lecture when academically they sit down at their textbook, they know all the information, they get to the test, and they just can't retrieve it.
Yeah, so some of these individuals are really high functioning, if you want to use that term, because they are able to function. They are able to do well in school, they are able to get a job, and as far as cognition goes, really there's not a whole lot that sensory processing holds that back. So that's one of those things that can just develop kind of inside the head, and it doesn't necessarily need to be connected to the body that much. But as Carrie was saying, that kind of sensory processing and that emotional and social relation can be really stunted if you're having a hard time processing sensations. So yeah, that does get you into those, I'm going to escape or block or be very, very concrete about feelings and emotions. I'm going to just be super objective and not really let my feelings help direct my decisions or anything like that. Or there's that tendency to, nope, my emotions are in control here and they are running the show, and that does impact my function. I can't live with other people. I can't keep a job. I can't tolerate being in the classroom. And it does get a little bit hard to figure out what's really the challenge for those individuals, because really, once you get old enough to realize you are your own person and you start to develop beliefs about yourself, that very quickly can turn into something that looks like more of a mental illness or a cognitive block between actually processing emotions and relating with other people.
Yeah, and it can become really confusing and really frustrating to know your capabilities and just not be able to get there. It feels like I've had adults tell me that it kind of feels like this needle in a haystack feeling of when their arousal is just right, they are on. And like we've talked about in prior videos, these individuals are some of the most brilliant people and some of the most talented people I've ever met, and I continue to be blown away at just all of these coping strategies that they've come up with, all of these areas that they go into because of these sensory strengths, kind of these sensory superpowers that we've called them before. But what is it that is pushing me back down into this dysregulated place? What we've learned from a sensory perspective is it has to go back to the body. So we have to be thinking about the body in terms of strategies and in terms of making your nervous system feel better. If your nervous system is the thing throwing you off kilter, then let's use your nervous system to get you back. Let's try to find some control. And typically that means finding movement activities, finding touch, finding visual information that feels good for you, not just blocking out the ones that don't feel good. And that can feel like a big process to somebody who's never been treated for SPD in the past, and they're coming to us at 40 years old and saying, I don't think there's anything that feels good for me. And in truth, typically once we continue exploring, we get your arousal in a good place, we get you actually moving through space, and suddenly we don't have to be using any words anymore. We're communicating through the body, and they are just blown away at how much control they can have over their regulation solely by just adding or removing different sensory information.
So one of the things that I've connected recently in different conversations that I've had with other professionals is so many times individuals with sensory processing challenges make meaning from their sensations when it's really just a sensation that is showing discomfort in the body. So what I mean by that is, oh man, I don't feel good. Maybe I'm sick, or maybe I'm going crazy. But it could literally be you haven't drank enough water and you haven't moved today. And so thinking about how we tend to, when we're just stuck in our heads, think about all of the ways that we're actually just, something's wrong with us. And it can literally be just a disconnection with the body and not actually processing what the body's telling you effectively. And you can misinterpret that, and you can be confused and frustrated by that. So we are missing the mark a lot of times with individuals with sensory challenges in just talking about cognitive strategies and beliefs and working on coping strategies that are really thought-based. And yes, it is okay, let's focus in on the breathing and let's pay attention to the sensations around you. That's a step in the right direction, but it's still missing what are you feeling. And a lot of people don't know when they come to us. They really don't know. And taking the time to teach them how to tune into their bodies and how to give their bodies what they need can get them so much further than talking about taking deep breaths.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have one of our series on the webinar that we just released, the Sense webinar, is called the Mind-Body Connection. We go into a little bit more detail on this, and it was a really great conversation, kind of talking more in depth on this subject, as well as a couple other areas. And we really appreciate all your support for that webinar. It's been really exciting that we've been able to get that out to all of you, and we're happy with the feedback we're getting so far, and we would love continued feedback on it. Another exciting thing that's happening to keep the momentum going is that we are doing some roundtable discussions the next 2 Mondays. So I believe that's the
12th and the 19th.
Yes, so February 12th and February 19th at 11 a.m. Mountain Time. So this coming Monday on the 12th, we will be talking with professionals who are interested in starting a conversation about adult SPD treatment, research, etc. So this is available for paid members under our platform, and we'll post a link below so you guys have that.
And then the following week, we're going to be opening up a Zoom roundtable for individuals that maybe aren't professionals but have an interest in SPD, especially for the treatment or strategies to manage SPD as a adolescent or an adult. So that's going to be on the 19th, and that's also for paid members. And it's going to be really exciting to, Carrie and I have talked about how we really enjoy working with the individuals we work with and doing these presentations and kind of talking about topics that come up really frequently, but we really, really want to kind of close the circle of communication with those of you out there and talk to you about the questions you have, the challenges you're facing, the hopes and dreams you have for this community, because it's a community that we believe in, that we feel very strongly about supporting, but we also want to make it more of a back and forth conversation. So we would love to have as many of you as can join us in those roundtables so we can start having that back and forth conversation.
Yeah, so post any questions that you have, any feedback, and we look forward to seeing you soon.